The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the rotting wooden docks of Port Royal, casting long shadows across the filthy planks where seawater mixed with spilled rum and blood from the morning's brawls. The air was thick with salt sweat, and the stench of fish left too long in the heat. Elias Kane stood apart from the crowd, his weathered face hidden beneath the wide brim of a salt-stained hat, watching the scene unfold with the detached interest of a man who had seen too much and cared about too little. At 53, Elias was a ghost of the pirate he once was. His ship, the Serpent's Mercy, sat anchored in the harbour, a vessel as worn and weary as its captain. The crew that remained with him were mercenaries at best, bound by coin rather than loyalty. Elias preferred it that way. Loyalty had betrayed him before, cost him everything worth having. Now he lived between the tavern and the sea, seeking oblivion in bottles of rum and the endless horizon. The crowd around the auction block grew louder, their voices a cacophony of greed and cruelty. Elias had no intention of participating. He'd come to the docks only to arrange repairs for his ship, nothing more. But something made him pause. Perhaps it was the unusual silence that fell when the auctioneer dragged his next piece of merchandise onto the platform. She was young, no more than 25, with sun-darkened skin and tangled dark hair that fell past her shoulders. Her simple dress, once white but now stained with seawater and dirt, clung to her frame, revealing the unmistakable curve of pregnancy. Her feet were bare and bleeding, her wrists marked with rope burns, but it was her eyes that caught Elias's attention. Despite everything, they burned with defiance, sweeping across the leering faces below with undisguised contempt, found floating on wreckage 3 days past. The auctioneer announced, his voice carrying across the docks. Spanish vessel went down in the storm. Only survivor. She's strong, healthy, and as you can see, already carrying cargo. Laughter erupted from the crowd. Perfect for breeding more workers, gentlemen. What's your opening bid? Elias felt his jaw tighten. He'd witnessed countless such auctions over the years, had even participated in the slave trade himself in younger, darker days. But something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the way she stood, refusing to bow her head. Maybe it was the memory of his own sister, lost to slavers 30 years ago when their village was raided. Or maybe he was just drunk enough to do something. Profoundly stupid. 200 pieces of 8, called out a fat merchant whose silk vest strained across his belly. 250, countered a plantation. Owner Elias recognized. 300. A pirate captain named Graves stepped forward, grinning with blackened teeth. Elias knew Graves' reputation. Any woman who fell into his hands would wish for death within a week. The woman's eyes met Elias's across the crowd. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just that connection. He saw no plea in her gaze, no begging. Only a quiet challenge, as if daring him to prove that some shred of humanity still existed in this godforsaken port. 500, Elias heard himself say, his voice cutting through the bidding. The crowd turned to look at him, murmurs spreading like wildfire. The auctioneer's eyebrows rose. 500 from Captain Kane. Do I hear 6? Graves spat on the ground and glared at Elias. 600, and that's my final offer. Elias stepped forward, the crowd parting before him. His reputation still carried weight, even in his diminished state. 1,000 pieces of 8 gold. The sum represented nearly everything he had left from his last raid, money he'd planned to use for ship repairs and supplies. Silence fell over the docks. Graves cursed and turned away. No one else spoke. Sold! The auctioneer brought down his gavel. To Captain Elias Kane for 1,000 in gold. 20 minutes later, Elias stood with the woman on a quieter section of the dock, the transaction complete. She hadn't spoken a word, just followed him with that same defiant posture, though he noticed her hand occasionally moved to support her swollen belly. "What's your name?" he asked finally, his voice rougher than he intended. She studied him for a long moment before answering. "Marina." Her accent carried the soft lilt of Spanish mixed with something else. Portuguese, perhaps. "I'm not going to hurt you," Elias said, though he knew such words meant little from a man like him. "I have a small house on the edge of town. You'll stay there. I'll arrange for a midwife when your time comes." "Why?" The single word carried the weight of genuine confusion. Elias looked out at the harbour, where his ship rocked gently on the tide. "Because I'm tired of being the man who does nothing." He pulled a key from his pocket and handed it to her, along with a small pouch of coins. "The house is at the end of Rum Street, blue door. Get yourself some food and clean clothes. I'll be there after sunset." Marina took the key but not the coins. "I don't need charity. If you bought me, then I work for my keep." Despite himself, Elias felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but close. "We'll discuss terms later. For now, just stay alive and keep that child safe." As she walked away, Elias wondered what madness had possessed him. He'd just spent his fortune on a pregnant stranger, derailing his plans and potentially making enemies of men like Graves. The smart thing would be to get drunk and forget about it. Instead, he headed toward the chandler's shop to buy supplies for a pregnant woman and an infant. The Caribbean sun blazed overhead, and for the first time in years, Elias Kane felt something other than numbness, the faint, uncomfortable stirring of purpose. 3 weeks passed before Elias and Marina established an uneasy routine. She kept the small house cleaner than it had been in years, cooked meals that actually tasted like food rather than survival, and never once asked him about his past. He in turn gave her space, brought supplies, and tried not to think about how natural it felt to have someone waiting when he came home from the docks. The house itself was modest, 2 rooms and a kitchen, with walls that had once been painted yellow, but now faded to a tired cream. It sat at the edge of Port Royal, far enough from the rowdy tavern district to offer some peace, but close enough that Elias could hear the ocean at night. He'd won it in a card game years ago, and had used it mainly for storage. Now it felt almost like a home. Marina's pregnancy advanced noticeably. She moved with increasing difficulty, one hand always supporting her lower back. Elias had hired Mrs. Chen, a Chinese midwife known for her skill and discretion, to check on Marina weekly. "The baby is healthy," Mrs. Chen reported after her latest visit. "Maybe 2 months more. She's strong, your woman." "She's not my woman," Elias corrected automatically, but Mrs. Chen just smiled knowingly and left. That evening, as rain began to patter against the roof, the first drops of what would become a fierce Caribbean storm, Elias found Marina sitting at the small wooden table, staring at something spread before her. As he approached, she quickly moved to cover it, but not before he glimpsed faded ink on yellowed parchment. "What is that?" he asked, setting down the basket of fruit he'd brought. Marina hesitated, her hand protective over her belly. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "It's nothing, just something from before." Elias pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Marina, in 3 weeks you've never asked me about my business, never questioned why I live alone, never demanded anything. The least you can do is tell me why you're hiding a map." Her dark eyes flashed. "Because men kill for maps. Because I've already lost everything, my ship, my crew, my—" Her voice broke. "My husband." The rain intensified, hammering the roof like drums. Elias waited, giving her time. "His name was Tomas," she continued quietly. "He was the navigator on the Santa Cecilia, a merchant vessel running between Cartagena and Havana. I was the captain's daughter. We married against my father's wishes." A sad smile crossed her face. Tomas was brilliant with charts and stars. He could read the sea like a book. She pulled the map toward her, unfolding it carefully. 3 months ago, we rescued an old man from a sinking sloop. He was dying, delirious with fever. Before he passed, he gave this to Tomas, said it was worth more than kingdoms. Tomas thought it was the ravings of a sick mind, but he kept it anyway. Elias leaned closer, studying the map. It was old, perhaps 70 or 80 years, drawn with the precision of a trained cartographer. It showed a section of the Caribbean he recognized, but with additional details he'd never seen. Small islands that didn't appear on modern charts, currents marked in red ink, and there on an unnamed island, a notation in faded Spanish, "El tesoro de los hermanos perdidos," the treasure of the lost brothers. Elias's heart quickened despite himself. He'd heard the legend every pirate had. 2 Spanish brothers, renegade conquistadors, had allegedly hidden a fortune somewhere in the Caribbean in the 1650s. Their own countrymen hunted them for betraying the crown. The treasure had never been found, and most dismissed it as myth. "When the storm hit," Marina continued, "our ship broke apart. Tomas had the map in his jacket. He put it in my hands and told me to swim. He went back for others." Tears streamed down her face. "I watched our ship go down, I floated on debris for 2 days before another vessel found me. They were slavers. They took everything I had except the map. I'd sewn it into my dress. When they reached Port Royal, they sold me rather than keep me aboard. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark white. Elias studied the map more carefully. If it was authentic, it could be worth a fortune. Enough to buy a new ship, new crew, a new life. Enough to matter. Why are you showing me this? He asked. Marina looked at him directly. Because you saved me when you didn't have to. Because I've watched you these 3 weeks, and I see a man who hates himself for past sins, but still has honor left. And because I need help. She placed both hands on her belly. This child deserves a future. The map is real, Captain Kane. Thomas believed it. I believe it. But I can't chase treasure while carrying a baby. So I'm offering you a partnership. Help me find it after the child is born and we split it evenly. Use your half however you want. I'll take mine and disappear. Give my child a life far from these waters. The storm raged outside, wind howling through the gaps in the shutters. Elias sat back, his mind racing. This was insane. The map could be a fake. The treasure could be long gone. And even if it was real, they'd need a ship, a crew, supplies, all things he could barely afford now. But as he looked at Marina, this woman who'd lost everything yet still fought for her child's future, he felt something shift inside him. For 20 years he'd been chasing gold, glory, anything to fill the emptiness. He'd found none of it. Maybe this was different. Maybe this time it wasn't just about the treasure. All right, he said finally. After the baby comes, we'll go. But we do it right. Small crew, people I trust, and we keep this absolutely secret. If word gets out about this map, we'll have every pirate and privateer in the Caribbean hunting us. Marina nodded, relief washing over her features. She extended her hand across the table. Partners. Elias shook it, her hand small but calloused and strong in his. Partners. As the storm continued to rage, they bent over the map together, beginning to plan. Neither noticed how natural it felt, sitting side by side. Neither acknowledged the comfort they'd found in each other's company. Not yet. But outside, the Caribbean winds whispered of changes coming, some written on maps, others written in hearts. The baby arrived during the hottest week of August, when the air hung so thick and still that even breathing felt like work. Marina's labor lasted 14 hours, her screams echoing through the small house, while Mrs. Chen worked with calm efficiency and Elias paced outside like a caged animal, useless and terrified in equal measure. When the infant's cry finally pierced the air, Elias felt his knees go weak with relief. Mrs. Chen emerged, wiping her hands on a cloth, her face serene. A daughter. Both healthy. You can go in now. Elias found Marina propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in clean linen. The baby had a shock of dark hair and Marina's delicate features. When Elias approached, the infant's eyes, unfocused but alert, seemed to find him. She's beautiful, he said, his voice catching unexpectedly. Marina smiled, tired but genuine. Her name is Lucia, after my mother. She looked up at him. Would you like to hold her? Elias's first instinct was to refuse. He'd held dying men and loaded cannons, but an infant seemed infinitely more fragile, more precious, more capable of breaking. But Marina was already extending the bundle toward him, and he found himself accepting, his scarred hands impossibly gentle as they supported the small weight. Lucia yawned, a sound so tiny and perfect that Elias felt something crack open in his chest, some hardened place he'd thought sealed forever. He'd had no children of his own, had never allowed himself to imagine such a thing. But here, holding this new life, he understood why men built empires and fought wars. Some treasures couldn't be measured in gold. She's going to have a better life than we did, Marina said softly, watching them. I promise her that. We promise her that, Elias corrected, then realized what he'd said. He carefully returned Lucia to her mother's arms. I should let you rest. I'll be right outside if you need anything. Over the following weeks, Elias discovered he'd become something he never expected, a father figure. He found himself hurrying home from the docks to check on Marina and Lucia, bringing small gifts, a rattle carved from driftwood, soft fabric for baby clothes, exotic fruits from merchants. Marina healed and grew stronger, and together they settled into a rhythm of domestic life that felt both foreign and surprisingly right. But peace in Port Royal was always temporary. It started with Graves. Elias had noticed the pirate captain watching the house, always from a distance, always with that calculating look. Then came the questions in the taverns, casual inquiries about the woman Elias had bought, about what made her worth 1,000 gold pieces. Elias deflected, but rumors spread anyway, growing more elaborate with each retelling. Then, 2 months after Lucia's birth, Elias came home to find the door ajar. His heart stopped. He drew his pistol and pushed inside, every sense alert. The main room was empty but showed signs of a struggle. A chair overturned, Marina's shawl on the floor. He heard a sound from the bedroom and moved swiftly. Marina stood with her back against the wall, a kitchen knife in her hand, facing 2 men Elias recognized from Graves's crew. One held baby Lucia, who was crying. The other blocked Marina's path. "Easy now, Captain," the one holding Lucia said, grinning. "Graves just wants to talk to the lady about a certain map he's heard whispers of. Give it up peaceful-like and nobody gets hurt." Rage, white-hot and absolute, flooded through Elias. His pistol came up, aimed steadily at the man's head. "Put down the child now." "You shoot me, my finger might twitch," the man said, but fear flickered in his eyes. "This baby might fall." "Then you'd best pray your reflexes are good," Elias said coldly, "because I've blown men's heads off at twice this distance, and my hands never shake." The room froze in a tableau of tension. Lucia's cries filled the silence. Marina's knuckles were white around the knife handle. "Last chance," Elias said. "Put her down gently, walk out, and maybe I let you live." The man's confidence crumbled. He carefully set Lucia on the bed and backed toward the door, his companion following. "Graves won't forget this. He'll come himself next time. Let him try." Elias kept the pistol trained on them until they were out the door and running down the street. Marina rushed to Lucia, scooping her up, checking her over with frantic hands. She's okay," she kept repeating, as much to herself as to Elias. Elias bolted the door, then began checking the house. In the bedroom he found papers scattered, drawers rifled through. "Did they get the map?" Marina shook her head, still clutching Lucia. "I had it on me. I've kept it with me since," she stopped, realization dawning. "Since the rumors started. I knew someone would come eventually." They stared at each other, the truth settling between them like a weight. As long as they stayed in Port Royal, as long as people believed Marina possessed something valuable, they would never be safe. Graves wouldn't stop. "Others would follow. We have to leave," Marina said. "Tonight now?" Elias nodded slowly. "I have enough coin left for a small crew and supplies. The Serpent's Mercy can sail within hours if I call in favors." He paused. "But once we go, there's no coming back. We commit to finding this treasure, or we disappear into the Caribbean and hope no one follows." Marina looked down at Lucia, now calm again, her tiny hand gripping Marina's finger. When she looked up, her eyes were hard with determination. "Then we find it. We give her a future worth having, one bought with treasure or with our refusal to give up. Either way, we don't stop fighting." Elias felt that crack in his chest widen a little more. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about gold and started being about family. This strange, broken, beautiful family they'd accidentally created. "All right," he said. "I'll gather the crew. Pack only what you need, clothes, food, documents. We sail on the midnight tide." As Marina moved to gather their belongings, Elias took one last look around the small house that had briefly been a home. Then he stepped out into the Caribbean night to prepare for a journey that would change everything. Behind him, Lucia cooed softly, and Marina sang a Spanish lullaby. Ahead lay uncertain seas, treasure, and danger. But for the first time in decades, Elias Kane wasn't running from something. He was running toward it. The voyage began under favorable stars, the Serpent's Mercy cutting through Caribbean waters with the kind of speed that reminded Elias why he'd loved the sea. He'd assembled a crew of 7, all men he'd sailed with before who asked few questions and could be trusted in a fight. Marina proved surprisingly capable aboard ship, adapting quickly to the rhythms of maritime life. Despite Lucia strapped to her chest in a sling, Elias had improvised from sailcloth. Following the map's directions, they sailed south-southeast from Port Royal for 3 days, then turned east toward a cluster of islands rarely visited by trading vessels. The map indicated a small, unnamed island, little more than a rocky outcrop with dense vegetation. According to the notations, the brothers had chosen it precisely because it looked worthless. They anchored offshore on a grey morning when clouds hung low and heavy, promising rain. Elias took Marina, 2 crew members and Lucia ashore in the longboat, leaving the others to guard the ship. The beach was narrow, covered in black volcanic sand that crunched beneath their boots. "The map shows a cave entrance on the north side," Marina said, studying the yellowed parchment, while keeping one hand protectively over Lucia, who dozed against her chest. "There should be rock formations shaped like a cross. They found it within an hour, weathered volcanic rock that formed a natural cross, half hidden by vines and creeping vegetation. Behind it, a narrow cave mouth yawned dark and uninviting. Elias lit torches and led them inside. The cave walls were damp, covered in mineral deposits that gleamed in the flickering light. They moved slowly, carefully, following a path that twisted deeper into the island's heart. Lucia woke and fussed, but Marina hummed softly to calm her. "There," one of the crew members said, pointing. The passage opened into a larger chamber. In the center, barely visible under decades of accumulated dust and debris, stood a wooden chest bound in iron. Elias's heart hammered as they approached. This was it, the moment every treasure hunter dreamed of. He knelt and brushed away the dirt. The chest was real solid, locked with a mechanism so corroded it took 3 attempts to break. When it finally gave way, Elias lifted the lid. Gold coins spilled out, glinting in the torchlight. Jewelry set with emeralds and rubies. Silver ingots stamped with Spanish royal seals. Gold chains thick enough to buy estates. They all stared in silence, the weight of the discovery settling over them. "Madre de Dios," Marina whispered. "It's real. All of it." Elias reached in, letting coins run through his fingers. It was more than he'd imagined. Enough to buy fleets of ships to live like kings for the rest of their lives. Everything he'd ever wanted right here. Lucia chose that moment to cry. Not upset, just making the random sounds infants make. Marina bounced her gently and the baby quieted. Staring up at her mother with wide, trusting eyes, Elias looked at them. This woman who'd been sold as property, and this child who'd entered the world with nothing, and suddenly the gold seemed less bright. He thought of what they'd been through together, the strange family they'd become. He thought of Marina singing lullabies in the small house, of holding Lucia for the first time, of the quiet moments that had meant more than all his years of raiding. "Take half the coins, load them quickly," he told his crew. "We're not staying long. This island feels wrong." They worked efficiently, filling canvas bags with their share of the treasure. When they finished, Elias looked at the chest again. "More than half remained. What about the rest?" Marina asked. Elias made a decision. "We take what we need for a good life, nothing more. The rest stays here." He pulled out the map, held it to his torch until it caught fire, then dropped the burning paper on the cave floor. "And we make sure no one else can find it." Marina stared at him. "Are you insane? That's a fortune." "It's also a curse," Elias said quietly. "How many men do you think will hunt us? If word spreads we found the lost brother's treasure, how long before someone tries to take Lucia to force us to give it up? We take enough to start fresh, really fresh, far from here. We use it to build something real." Understanding dawned in Marina's eyes. She looked down at Lucia, then back at the remaining treasure. "Where would we go?" "I've heard the American colonies need skilled ship captains for legitimate merchant trade. Boston, maybe, or Charleston. Places where we could be normal people. Where Lucia could go to school, grow up safe." He met her eyes. "Where we could have a life that matters more than gold." Marina was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Partners?" "Partners," Elias confirmed. "But maybe more than that now?" A smile spread across Marina's face, the first truly happy smile he'd seen from her. "Yes, more than that." They sealed the cave entrance as best they could, making it look like a natural rock slide. Back aboard the Serpent's Mercy, Elias paid each crew member generously and swore them to secrecy with both threats and rewards. By the time they reached a neutral port 3 days later, most of the crew dispersed, taking their shares to start their own lives. Elias sold the Serpent's Mercy to a Portuguese merchant for a good price. With that and their share of the treasure converted to more portable gems, they booked passage on a merchant vessel bound for Charleston. The ship's cabin was small but clean. Elias sat on the bunk, watching Marina nurse Lucia while the ocean rolled beneath them. The baby fed contentedly, one tiny hand clutching Marina's finger. "Do you regret it?" Marina asked quietly. "Leaving the rest of the treasure?" Elias thought about it honestly. 2 months ago I would have killed anyone who got between me and that gold. But now? He reached out, gently touching Lucia's soft hair. "I found something worth more. Something I didn't even know I was looking for." Marina leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Thomas would have liked you," she said softly. "He always said the best treasure was the one that made you a better man." "He was wiser than me," Elias said. "But you learned," Marina replied. "That's what matters." As the ship sailed north toward their new life, Elias reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. He'd gone to those docks expecting nothing, bought a woman on impulse, and discovered that redemption wasn't something you found in gold or glory. It was something you built piece by piece with people who mattered. Lucia finished nursing and looked up at him with those dark, alert eyes. He smiled at her, a real smile, unforced and genuine. She cooed, and it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. "What will you do in Charleston?" Marina asked. "Besides legitimate merchant work," Elias considered. "I was thinking, maybe we open a home for sailors' widows and orphans. Use some of the treasure money to help people like you were, people who lost everything at sea. Give them a chance at a new start." Marina's eyes shone with tears. "That's perfect. And maybe I could teach navigation, reading, skills that help people survive." "So we build something," Elias said. "Something that lasts longer than gold. Something that matters," Marina agreed. The Caribbean faded behind them as they sailed toward the American coast. Somewhere back there, an island held a fortune in gold that would probably never be found. But Elias Kane had discovered something far more valuable, that a lonely pirate could become a father, a criminal could choose redemption, and 2 broken people could build a family from nothing. The real treasure, he realized, was never buried. It was growing up in his arms, sleeping against Marina's shoulder, living and breathing and full of infinite possibility. It was the woman beside him, who taught him that courage came in many forms. It was the future they would build together, one day at a time. As the sun set over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of gold that rivaled any treasure, Elias Kane finally understood what he'd been searching for all along. And for the first time in his life, he was content. The ship sailed on through the gathering darkness, carrying 3 souls toward their new beginning, toward the only treasure that truly mattered: home, family, and the chance to be better than who they'd been before. And in the warm Caribbean night they left behind, the waves whispered secrets of redemption to anyone willing to listen.